All right, so we're on our second major prophet. Very different from the prophet Isaiah. In a couple ways that, just a couple overviews before we start talking about the specifics of this book of the Bible. Unlike Isaiah, who has three different voices, really, that are, spanning 300 years of time, and certainly weren't written by the same prophetic voice. You have in Jeremiah really a kind of collection of the voice of Jeremiah. Now, whether it's him specifically or Jeremiah and his, Baruch is writing it down, or other disciples that are in Jeremiah's clan of his prophetic club are sharing his thoughts. But they do seem to be Jeremiah's thoughts and predictions that have been carried by this group over a period of time. You also had Jeremiah is regarded as one of the youngest of all the prophets. He's, I knew you from the womb, and I have plans. I know the plans I have made for you. He has anxiety about being a young person and confronting the elders who he's been taught to respect, but to speak truth to people because of his age. And there's a huge cultural difference between the respect level. I mean, we have some of that today still here, but it's much more pronounced at this time in the Middle East, and still would be more pronounced in the Middle East than it is probably in our culture, for better or worse. So Jeremiah is kind of a bold young voice who's called by God to say some really unpopular, let's be honest, it would be viewed as unpatriotic, the things he was saying. Yeah, let's surrender. God's telling you that you should surrender to the Babylonians and you'll survive, instead of fighting it out, because that's not what God wants us to do. And I just picture that in the United States, if we were in a war, a pressure of a war situation, a draft's going on, and somebody's saying, we should just surrender. I think that would go over. So let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of his message, who he is, and then kind of his attitude, his spiritude as a person and as a writer. So with that said, you've read half the book, or all of it, but use that reading time. It is the longest, in terms of wordage, character count book in the Bible. So we've split it up over the course, and that's why we've had a couple of reading. We're going to have another reading week to finish this one off, give you a little break before we get into Ezekiel, Daniel, finishing off the major prophets, Lamentations, and the minor prophets. It is downhill from here in terms of the difficulty of reading. So you're going to be excited about that, I think.
But regardless, though it's difficult, it's good to know who the prophets are, who they were.
Oh, yeah.
How they may have differed.
Yeah.
It's a whole other discussion, but
yeah.
We have a nice...
That's why we're doing it.
We have a discussion about different prophets in the Old Testament and how they were alike and how they may be different.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're colorful figures, and we're going to talk a lot about that. Some of Jeremiah's visions are very colorful. So, your reactions. You've read the first 39, or first 29 verses or chapters of Jeremiah. What were your reactions? And
I thought it was due today.
What did you see? I'm sorry?
Oh, I thought it was due today.
Okay, well,
That's why
how many of you read the whole thing? Just, okay. You're an overachiever, Barb.
I read 28.
So tell me your sense of Jeremiah initially, and what stood out to you. How did you comparatively to Isaiah? Because they're right next to each other. They're different, certainly different messengers. Have a different approach, different tone. What stuck out to you in your readings this week?
I felt like it was a lot of doom and gloom.
Mm.
And the other thing that really struck me was that Jeremiah, like, really lamented or felt so heartbroken by what was happening, despite the fact that he wasn't being treated very well. No one was listening to him, and I was struck by that because I'm thinking, if no one's listening to you and no one is respecting you and they're beating you and whatever, but then you're still heartbroken that everything is going down like that, I was kind of struck by that.
I think he had discussions at the temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I would think that you'd have elders, people at maybe three times his age there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe have an extremely different point of view than he does,
Oh, yeah.
right? So they kind of have that whole interaction going at the same time.
Yeah, so we'll stick on this point for a minute. So we're going to see that, and you'll notice when I send out the new revised reading list, but I'm actually asking a lot of you for the next 2 weeks. We have next week as a reading week because it's Thanksgiving, and then we're going to finish Jeremiah, but I'm asking you to also read Lamentation out of order. It's four chapters. But the reason I'm asking you to do that is because Lamentation is written by Baruch and Jeremiah.
Why is it out of order? Isn't that next?
Ezekiel's next.
Oh, it is?
It should be. I'm sorry?
That's what, when I read that, how many, and I thought, they mean
Yeah.
lamentation?
In my Bible,
lamentation,
Lamentations
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, you guys are right. You guys are right. Yeah. You guys are right. So we are going to jump into Lamentations straight away.
But we have like 2 weeks.
You have 2 weeks to do
We
it.
have 2 weeks to do it.
So, but the reason is that Lamentations captures what you just spoke to. Have you ever read How Great, or you ever sang the song How Great Thou Art?
Oh, yeah.
That's from Lamentations. It's a book that talks of the lamenting of the destruction of a people and a people's stubbornness to be open to trusting God more deeply than they do. And so, yeah, Jeremiah certainly encounters people twice his age, 3 times his age. Very different perspective, very different life experience, and very different outlook. You'll see that in these readings that we had this week. Some of them thought, there's no way Babylon is going to conquer us. First of all, we've got this. This isn't a problem. Let them come. We'll fight it out, and we'll be here just fine. And then some of them thought, you're just a doomsdayer, right? We're living high on life here. This isn't going to happen. There's no real signs that this is going to happen. So just, take your placard that the world is going to come to an end and go home, Jeremiah. And so you're right. He has his opponents. We're going to see Hananiah, the prophet, challenges him with his own yoke. Can't talk today. It's dueling prophets. But yeah, you're right that he's a little darker, a little glass half empty, isn't he? Yeah. Anything else that stuck out to you? Yeah.
2 things. That God says Nebuchadnezzar is his servant,
Yes.
and also the balm in Gilead.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We used to go to a church that the pastor loved that song and would sing.
There is a
all the time. I'm like,
balm in
"Oh,
Gilead. Yeah, it's a beautiful song. We got to get that one back in the hymnody. Yeah, it's so you saw that in Isaiah with Cyrus, that God was going to use Cyrus as an instrument to return the people who were in exile to Israel. Here you see Nebuchadnezzar is going to be. Now the question is, from the biblical writer's perspective, because Nebuchadnezzar would have never said, "Yeah, the Jewish God is using me to, do this in the world." Certainly, there's not a Babylonian record of that, but the Jewish prophets say yes. He might be the antithesis of godliness, but God's going to use him to teach us a lesson is what the prophet is saying. So, bad news bears leader, but we're gonna go through his winnowing fork or baptism of fire, and God's gonna allow this or use this to happen, which sets up a interesting faith dynamic for discussion. You know, because you have texts like James that says God never uses evil or temptation for as a good God doesn't do that to test us. He might test us, but he doesn't use evil to test us. Whereas Prophet Jeremiah would say, yeah, God can use, hey, he's the potter at the wheel. He can throw that clump of clay away and start over, right? God is God. God can do whatever God wants. So it's a little bit different idea of the relationship between God, good and evil, and God's omnipotency in the world. Does that make sense? Do you follow what I mean there? One, evil is a source outside of God's actions that God is fighting or opposed to, and the other is that God manages all the chess pieces. And it's not that God is evil, but God allows evil to move about the board as part of God's overall plan that we might not understand. Okay? Great. And the balm of Gilead, that healing from that place of Israel and a place of restoration. It's always used in terms of restoration and healing. Anybody else have any? Yeah, Dave.
This plan that is being presented, the options are really exile for 70 years.
Yep.
Or
Bing.
total destruction, basically. Right? And if you choose to fight against God's agent, that's the destruction. You go into exile and slavery, I assume.
It's going to be a 70-year.
Yeah, that's your.
Yeah, time behind bars. Yeah, time in exile. Yeah, those are your choices. You want bad or you want worse. But either way, in Jeremiah is not as sugarcoating as Isaiah, right? Isaiah is gentler. Jeremiah says, "Listen, you'll survive with your lives, but it's not going to be good. But you have this coming." And the people say, "Nah, what are you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?" So yeah. So let's. Any other?
It seems like you're changing time frames, like constantly, like you're going back and then forward.
Yes.
Not like chronological.
Right, because we have midway through it, we have them in exile, and then we have it back predicting the exile. So you're right. It's fast forward, rewind, fast forward, rewind. It's putting all these ideas together, but it's not linear, which makes Jeremiah hard to read. Mm-hmm. Great observation. Anything else that stuck out to you? So let's talk about prophets. Mark said we study these and it's good to know the differences. So you remember back when we read 1st, 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, and we had the prophet Elijah and the prophet Elisha, and there was the axe head that floated in the water, and there was the poison in the soup that they, in the pot that they put some salt in, and then it was good. But there was those kind of strange stories, and one prophet says, hit me, punch me, and he didn't punch him, and he dies, gets mauled by a lion, and then somebody else punches him, and then he says his prophetic message. You remember all these kind of weird stories? So
I don't remember that one, the punching one?
oh yeah, the guys, they're walking along, the army's walking along the road.
Elijah.
Oh, that one wasn't the prophet Elijah. That's an unnamed prophet. He tells another guy, one of the soldiers, to punch him, and the soldier refuses, and then he says, you won't make it home tonight. He gets mauled by a lion and dies. And somebody else, he tells to punch him, and then he punches him, and then he gives his prediction. You remember that one?
I remember that. What was the prediction?
I don't remember. It was something about God. It's something about God punishing, but it's in there. Yeah, look it up. Look it up in your spare time. It's a bizarre one.
You're all caught up, so you can read.
Yes, that's your homework for this week. I believe it's in. It's with Joab and David, so it's going to be 2 Samuel probably. Yeah, 2 Samuel. It's going to be in 2 Samuel. I don't think I put the mortgage on that, but it's pretty close. So we have a series of weird things that God tells Jeremiah to do. Just wait till we get to Ezekiel. God's going to tell Ezekiel to do some really strange stuff. Now, I like to talk about the parable of the dirty undies. So let's let's talk about that. Let's talk about that one. That's so Jeremiah chapter 13. I don't know if you remember this in your reading, but God tells Jeremiah to go buy a new linen loincloth. So basically, go buy some undies.
What was that?
Yeah,
The linen belt.
yeah. Well,
Loincloth makes more
Oh,
sense.
linen belt, yeah, okay.
yeah. So basically, this is underwear.
Just 13.
Just chapter 13. Chapter 13, 1.
Does yours say
So then
linen belt?
he tells him to take these undies and hide them, squash them in a rock, in a group of rocks, and wait for an undesignated, a couple weeks, a couple months, indiscriminate amount of time. And then finally he says, hey, you remember those undies I told you to stash? Oh yeah, I want you to go bring those out. I've got a lesson for the people. So Jeremiah goes and he grabs these undies that are trashed. Can't wear them. But he says, I mean, again, it's right by the river, so you're going to get a little overflow maybe here and there. Take the loincloth, and it's ruined. It's good for nothing, so that's verse 7. And then, he's giving him an example of the pride of Judah being ruined over time, like this brand new, pristine set of wares is going to be ruined. Very, very... you want to have, as your mother or grandmother might have told you, you want to leave the house with clean undies. And the idea of having really soiled undies around sensitive areas is not a good thing. So it's a very graphic image to say Israel has taken what was a pure, wonderful thing and ruined it over time. It can't be used anymore. It cannot be. Judah is not functioning as the people I've called them to be. They're unrecognizable. So you've got that. Good for nothing. Undies. Then we have the figs. He sees the vision of the 2 figs. There's some good figs and bad figs. And then he has this yoke business where he's before the king in his court. He makes a yoke, and he says, all of you are saying that this time isn't going to come where we're oppressed by the Babylonians, where we're carried off in hooks in our noses, and we're drug off, and we're the yoke that is going to pull or be the labor force of Babylon. But I tell you, so he's got the visual. He's got himself in stocks. This is what's going to happen to us. So, I mean, again, kind of, you want to get people's attention. They're not listening to you, so you go drastic. And he gets his costume going. He goes drastic. And then the prophet Hananiah, who is also part of the king's court and who is older, to Mark's point, is going to build an iron yoke. So we're in 27. I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Well, with the underwear thing, there was
Yeah.
also something with a wineskin. I didn't get that. What was that supposed to? It was like in the same exact spot. And that's why I didn't understand, because I'm like, what is the loincloth and the wineskin? I was confused.
Yeah, it's right after the linen belt. Same chapter.
Yeah, and I didn't know if that was supposed to be the same, sorry, I didn't mean to go back. God, he said to do something specific, yeah, he said the lady like hit the gas and there was like a stroller and a dad, and so I was delayed for a second.
That's okay. All right, wait, tell me where we're seeing the landscape.
It's from 13
It's
to
on the
12.
back, yeah, the back end of
Jeremiah
13.
13,
Yeah.
verse 12. 13, verse 12. Like God saying every wineskin should be filled with wine. Yeah, like that.
So I guess it was just saying that people were gonna be drunk.
Yeah.
Good question.
Great question. So I think it's, it's that whole, I would say that what stands out to me about it, and I'm just taking a look at it briefly here, but it sounds like the differences in attitudes, like Paul is talking about, what shall we say, to the foolishness of the world. People say, eat, drink, and be merry, because this is all there is. So just live it up. And to me, it's the same kind of sentiment here. Like God's going to make, everybody's going to have full glasses, and they're going to be drunk on life, and say, we got nothing to worry about. But I'm telling you, it's coming. Which is the same kind of message as that loincloth thing. These are great, except they're not, and this is going to be a problem. So the whole first part of the book is about we're going to get crushed by the Babylonians. So, and then it goes into that very unpopular, so king, so prophets, so priests, I need you to tell the people to surrender. I need you to surrender. And they say, you're crazy. You are nutty. We are not going to surrender. And not only that, but you're a traitor. And so we have that part at the end where some of them say, this man should be put to death. Jeremiah should be put to death for speaking such things. And then we have the other, and let me see if I can find that. There's another who says no, because even in the days of Zephaniah, somebody stood up, and in the days of, so there's a voice, there's a presence calling for him to be killed. And then there's a counterpoint saying, no, a true prophet sometimes speaks unpopular things. And we know that a prophet who prophesies peace, the word of a prophet comes true, then we'll know that it's truly from the Lord and that the Lord has sent this prophet. Because Jeremiah says, hey, I hope what you're saying, Hananiah, is true. I hope you're saying that Babylon won't crush us. But the fact of the matter is, what I'm telling you is from God, and you are lying to the people. So imagine, so here are two guys, at least the scripture doesn't tell us, but two guys who probably both believe God is telling them to give this message to the king. And one of them tells the other, you are full of it and you're not of God. So do we have that kind of contrast between leaders of faith today, where one says, I hold the truth, and you are a false teacher, you're a false minister, you're a false prophet? Absolutely. How do you know which one of them is real? Well, whichever one comes to pass, or whichever one seems like closer to how you understand God to be. But, and I guess the other part of that is, how is it when somebody tells you something you don't want to hear versus somebody who's telling you everything you want to hear? Relate this to your own lives when you're looking for advice and one of your friends says, that's a terrible idea, or don't date that person, and you know deep down that they're probably right. But everybody else says, it'd be fine. He or she is cute, or this is going to work out. But you have misgivings because the person who's always honest with you says, I don't think so. because there's that one person in your life who's maybe just bluntly honest with you. Well, that's Jeremiah. Now, how does that work out for the person who's bluntly honest usually? Yeah.
They get yelled at a lot.
They get yelled at a lot. So when Jesus talks in the New Testament, and he's talking to the Pharisees, and he says, you're whitewashed tombs, you're painted nicely on the outside, but you're full of decaying bones on the inside. Your fathers and grandfathers killed the prophets, and their blood is on your hands. He's talking about this line of people who have, most of the prophets we're going to read ended like the disciples in pretty grisly endings. Not Isaiah, but some of them are going to meet a nasty demise or be mistreated. We're going to read about some things that happened to Jeremiah because people don't like him. People don't want to hear what he's saying. People, think he's a traitor to his own people. And it's not until, so it would be really interesting to see how, we don't have this, but it'd be interesting to be sitting amongst the people in exile and wondering what their take is on Jeremiah after it all goes down. Oh, yeah, I guess he was right. But, nobody really wants to talk about it anymore because now it's too late. So other thoughts on things that stood out to you?
Well, did he go into exile, or is that something we're gonna, in the second half we're gonna find out?
They dragged him to Egypt, weren't they?
Jeremiah is taken. Yeah, he and his crew, I think, are taken to Egypt. I think you're right. It's in here. And I apologize. I'm not as versed in Jeremiah as like Isaiah, but he gets carted off. Oh, here's the other piece that I forgot to talk about. So early on in this book, so we're talking about cultural context. First we have Josiah. You remember King Josiah, young king, finds prophetess Huldah finds the second book of the law, shows it to the king. He says, "Oh my gosh," what we call Deuteronomy today. I had no idea. Nobody told me this. So he initiates the Passover again. He reads the book of the law to the whole people. Josiah starts off as a great king, but then he gets it into his head that for whatever reason, even though Assyria is not messing with Israel at all, but they're going down the road. For those of you who have been to Israel, the main road, that's one of Israel's problems. You're Israel, Babylon and Assyria are over here, Egypt's down here. Well, to get to each other, they got to cross through, and Israel's kind of monkey in the middle. And so Assyria's going down to teach Pharaoh a lesson, and for whatever reason, as Pharaoh's bringing his army up by Megiddo, where the Battle of Armageddon is in the Bible, Josiah says, well, I'm going to go out and fight him. And Shishak, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and this is on both sides, so this is an out of the Bible thing as well. You can see this in Egyptian writing too. I've got no beef with you. Why are you fighting me? And he gets killed. The king of Israel gets killed. So you see a lot of, Jeremiah was close to Josiah. Jeremiah was a confidant of Josiah. So you see a lot of lamentation also. The death of a great king in his eyes. The death of a reformer. And after the reformer dies, there's this void. Josiah's sons are not like Josiah. And they turn away. And so Jeremiah is angry about that, disappointed in that. Remember, he's a young guy. You got an idealistic leader, probably attracted to a young prophet is probably like, this is, who cares about God? This is great. This is the reforms. The high places are being torn down. The scriptures being read to the people. We're celebrating Passover. It's all great. And then it's gone. And now these guys are taking us, you're not like your dad. These guys are taking us into a dark way, the ways of Israel, the ways of Samaria. And now, if we're not careful, God's saying, this is going to happen. Repent now. And they don't. So that's kind of the backdrop too of this story, is maybe why he is, why he seems so bitter and angry, because what was once very hopeful now looks very dim. So, yeah. Then we're going to get this more in Ezekiel. Really over the top in Ezekiel. But did you notice that Jeremiah, for lack of a better word, there's a lot of sexual imagery here, a lot of talking about your skirts are going to be lifted up and your shame exposed, and you're playing the whore, and So I can't speak to Jeremiah's personal life. I don't know anything about that. But there is, through specific prophets, Jeremiah, Hosea, Ezekiel, you get this imagery of infidelity, God as the husband, Israel as the wife, and in this case, the explicit shaming of uncovering and nakedness of a wife who has been around town a bit. And so it's a really explicit, jarring analogy that Jeremiah uses, which also makes him feel really, I don't know, again, kind of like an angry, bitter person. And then Ezekiel's going to go over the top with that in a hyperbole way that is that will make Jeremiah look like he's very stable. So Ezekiel's probably my favorite. He's just wheels off, like you're wondering if he's on LSD or something while he's writing some of these prophets. He's seeing visions. He's building dioramas and models and lying down naked as he's got all these little army figures surrounding the city. It's interesting. But he gets people's attention. He gets people's attention, that's for sure. Okay. Anything else that stands out to you that you want to talk about in the first part of Jeremiah? And he seems head shaking. Oh. All right. Well, then what we're going to do is, again, we're going to finish Jeremiah off for next week and Lamentations. So we'll put them together. And we'll talk about how this ends, not only for the prophet and for his contingency, but also in the context of Israel's life as a people, where Jeremiah falls after Josiah and the exile, what happens next, which prophet comes next, and we'll try to tie those minor prophets in, because some of them are contemporaries to Jeremiah as well. Like Zephaniah is going to be a contemporary who's going to talk about a lot of the same things in his book, but they're not in order again, so that puts us at a little disadvantage in terms of the timeline of things. Okay?
Just we are not meeting the 22nd.
That is next week.
Right, or the 29th.
We are, I'm going to send out a revised schedule.
Okay.
We are going to, is there a reason why we're not going to meet on the 29th other than that it says it there?
It says it was our reading week.
Well, I'm giving you
So
the rest of this
that's
week
fine.
and next week. I'm going to trust that that's enough time to finish this one off in Lamentations.
Okay.
And then we'll, so I'm going to send the revised
Jonah and Micah.
Jonah and Micah are in.
Okay.
We're going to do those as separate books. I know they seem small and they're only 4 chapters each, but we're going to have a full class on those for sure. And it's going to be fun.